Good afternoon. On behalf of a Suitable Agency and Sundar Nursery, it is my pleasure to welcome you to a wonderful new session of Suitable Conversations at Sundar Nursery. This series of conversations was inspired by a Suitable Agency's love for all things books, and we're extremely grateful to everyone at Sundar Nursery for their support and encouragement in making this happen, and to our wonderful audiences for making this one of the most popular literary events in Delhi today. Today's session is very special, and one we've been looking forward to for a while. It is called The Ladies Who Laugh, and features Twinkle Khanna, who will be chatting with Shrayana Bhattacharya, two terrific personalities and brilliant writers in conversation. Twinkle Khanna is one of India's most popular writers and columnists, with all her books topping the bestseller charts. She is the founder of Tweak India and the producer of the national award-winning film Padman, and she continues to advocate for systemic issues around menstrual hygiene. Two of her other stories are also currently being adapted into films. Twinkle's previous books are the immensely popular Mrs. Funnybones, The Legend of Lakshmi Prasad, and Pajamas Are Forgiving. After a 5-year hiatus, she is back with her fourth book, Welcome to Paradise, a collection of short stories that has just been published. During this interlude, Twinkle completed an MA in creative writing at Goldsmiths College, University of London, acquiring an exceptional distinction for her final thesis, and got longlisted by the university for the prestigious Pat Kavanaugh Prize. Welcome to Paradise is a testament to Twinkle's constant evolution as a storyteller. The stories in the collection center around women who are at a crossroads in their lives and deal with themes around marriage, parenthood, death, loneliness, and love, all written with Twinkle's trademark humor and dry observations. Shrayana Bhattacharya is trained in economics. She is the author of the award-winning, now iconic bestseller, Desperately Seeking Shah Rukh, India's lonely young women and a search for intimacy and independence. In this path-breaking work, she maps the economic and personal trajectories, the jobs, desires, prayers, love affairs, and rivalries of a diverse group of women. A compelling look at the female gaze, Desperately Seeking Shah Rukh is the story of how women have experienced post-liberalization India. Shrayana is also a favorite at Suitable Conversations. This is her third appearance here, and we are always delighted to have her back. We have some signed copies of Twinkle's new book available today, and after the session, Shrayana will be available to sign copies of her book. A warm welcome to both our speakers, and over to them.
Thank you. That was a very long and expansive set of introductions. I'm so excited to be in conversation with you, Twinkle. Well, first, because I promised you I would embarrass you a little bit. Largely because I'm really grateful for Twinkle's existence in our public conversation. And second, I'm very jealous of her. So let me start with why I'm grateful, and the jealousy will lead to my first set of questions. I'm deeply grateful that you exist in our public culture, because for my next book, I've been reviewing how much men speak and women speak in sort of publishing, newspapers, writing. And 1 out of 5 op-eds in our English newspapers are written by women. If you look at dialogue in Hindi cinema, basically about 30% of the dialogue is spoken by women. And often even the things that they're saying, well, we can sort of do a stress test when it comes to how progressive some of the characters tend to be. And I think often our public culture does feel like it's a bunch of very dull, self-serious people lecturing us about being Agyakari. And I think in that conversation, you are such a breath of fresh air, because you're not interested in lecturing us, you want to talk to us. And you talk about your testosterone levels and feeling like a ball of gas and all kinds of things that really center, I think, women's bodies and experiences. So thank you for that. I'm also very grateful that you make us laugh. And you laugh at yourself, and I think you encourage us to do the same through your books and your columns and all your work. And I think, for someone who, for 15 years, I studied how easy it is for women to laugh, and it's not that easy. Just having the free time, the space, just to have time to yourself. And the absurdity of our social norms are such, we need to laugh at ourselves, and you help us do that. So this is why I'm super grateful that you exist in our public culture. Now that I've embarrassed you, I will now tell you why I'm very jealous of you and put you in the spot a little bit. We promised, I hear from Cheeky that you have a story about Shah Rukh Khan potentially. I'm jealous of you, one, of course, because you have a remarkable writing career, all these bestsellers, everything. I'm also very jealous of you because you've done love songs with Shah Rukh Khan. And now I remember, this is Badshah, and if you haven't seen this film, shame on you. And we'll get into your book right after. And Twinkle's making a pained expression, and you are my victim now, but I have to ask you this. I saw you in 1999 in Badshah, you were a vision. And then I saw an interview of yours where you said you were a ball of gas during those songs. Can you tell us a little bit about what happens in those love songs and what is this story that Chiki alluded to? And after that, we will get into the meat of the book.
I was expecting this because she has a book called Desperately Seeking Shah Rukh, and I knew that she would bring that up. So I know you see all these actresses saying that they don't diet and they eat everything. It's not true. Most of them are starving. I was starving. And if you want your stomach to be flat and all those cat suits that we used to wear, I don't know why we wore them. Then I decided, this is before keto and intermittent fasting, and I said, this was my own brainwave, that I'm going to live on sing and chana for some reason. I'm Gujarati, so I felt that was also cheap, and I could get it easily wherever I went. And so this was my diet, and then I was, of course, in this song where he had to lift me up, and I was so scared that I would explode like the gas canisters in the parliament. But I didn't. So if you see my teeth clenching, there were other things also clenching and just holding on. But yes, I survived that bit as well. So there, you have your Shah Rukh Khan story.
There we go. And you were a vision in that movie. I do want, and if you haven't seen that film, shame on you, please go see it.
Now when I look back at it and I realize that I always thought that convex and concave were diametrically the opposite, but now I know that concave is the past tense of convex. And that's what I mean when I look at my stomach. I did have a review from that movie which only centered around my navel. That was it. And at that time, nobody protested. This was perfectly fine. We didn't think it was misogynistic. In fact, I think I thanked the writer and I said, oh, thank you so much.
And I think it was you who said the Shah Rukh still has his dimples and I have my navel, right?
Yep.
But let's move to this remarkable book, Twinkle. And we were talking about how Welcome to Paradise, 4 short stories, 1 novella. It feels like a shift in tone. I read your recent column, which I think draws on some of the themes of the book where you were talking about it's a conversation on aging and a public conversation around aging. You write these really beautiful stories about people dealing with death, decline, different stages. What is it that you're trying to get us to think about? Where did the ideas of focusing on aging come from? I was very moved by, you have, I think, a dedication to your Nani in the beginning where you say, this is dedicated to her, she's no longer alive, but even if she was, she wouldn't read it. I wonder if that's true. I'm curious to know where did the idea for focusing on this theme come from? And yeah.
I don't think I started out deciding to write a book on mortality and grief and loss and love and deception, but there were interesting images that had been in my head for a long time and characters, and that's how it began. So Chiki Sarkar said, I don't think you should write this book, and everybody will want Mrs. Funny Bones, and where are you? And I said, well, there's dark humor, but, and she will agree, nobody's really said that we are missing Mrs. Funny Bones. They seem satisfied with this. I think it was also because I'm at a stage where by now I've lost so many people. My friends have lost, parents, grandparents. We've lost friends. And the finishing line, which always seemed like it was so far away, is now vaguely visible. And I think these are the things that I've been thinking about. I've also been looking at older people and realizing that as we get older, we start really becoming invisible. Our eyesight's worsen and other people start becoming blind. We get on a hearing aid and they become deaf to what we have to say. And I thought that it was interesting to give those people a voice because I don't really feel that everybody runs after youth, but I don't really feel that there is a very special stage which is only around that. I think every stage has its own richness. So this was it. And a lot of women in these stories are not old. The protagonists are all in their 30s, but the old women just shine because you know what? They're more interesting. I mean, it happens to us. Okay, fine. Hair's migrating now from the scalp to the chin, but so what? It doesn't mean that your brain has collapsed. It's, you know, it's a rich, rich life, and I wanted to explore that.
And maybe what I'll do is talk a little bit about a few of the stories and request you perhaps to read from maybe Man from the Garage, if that. This is a stunning story about grief in an interfaith family. Huma pushes back against certain norms. I was very curious to understand where the material of this came from because, in fact, of all the stories, it felt the most tense with a backdrop of violence. This conversation, I don't want to give it away, but there is a lot of tension in the family. Maybe I could request you to read and tell us a little bit about where you drew the inspiration of writing Huma and this interfaith family and the story of loss from.
In terms of the interfaith family, I think it comes from my own background because, my grandmother is Ismaili, and there were all these debates always going around our house in terms of what's true in this story and what's not. That I'm going to keep to myself because otherwise I'd be writing a memoir and not fiction. And I'm not writing a memoir because I would be compelled to lie. So it's better off as fiction. I think this story deals with, it just has this Amma's dead body as a magnet, but it does deal with intergenerational trauma. Yeah. And it deals with drug addiction. But it's also funny because tragedy is funny. You go to a funeral, anyone's funeral, you'll cry for 3 days, but the human spirit is such that it can't really hold on to that sort of burden for long, and so you will end up making jokes, and that happens at all funerals. And then you have these old aunties on one side who look at you, at least when we were younger, and say, look at them, they're shameless, they're just laughing in a corner, but people are just trying to heal, and humor is healing. So yeah, I'll read a little bit. I mean, yeah, I did manage in a story about death with a dead body lying there to add pigs and penises in the same sentence. So yeah, but that's me. In one corner of Huma's living room, uncles, aunts, cousins are debating over what to do with Amma's body. This is not a traditional approach, but her religious legacy is not what they consider regular either. Amma was born into an Ismaili Muslim family. Huma's father, who loved his sweet dal in his puja room with the silver idols that he polished every week, agreed to a conversion ceremony to placate Amma's parents. He was a funny man, her father. On Tuesdays, he would go to the temple, and on Fridays, he accompanied Amma to the Jamaat Khana. To the people who questioned his all-encompassing beliefs, he would say, religion is like a tree. It doesn't matter which one you choose to sleep under. They all provide shade. Huma remembers asking him, Daddy, tell the truth. You copied this tree bit from your Osho book, right? Like me, my dialogues are also all original, he had replied in Gujarati. When he passed away, he was cremated at the Shivaji Park Cemetery just as he had wished, and without any of the fuss accompanying her mother's funeral. In the noisy living room, the extended family has divided itself into two factions. Team Crematorium, led by Padma Ben, Huma's father's sister, claims that like Huma's father, Amma must also be cremated. Team Cemetery includes the relatives from Amma's side. They argue that since she had spent her entire life following the Ismaili faith, she should be buried. Murad, Amma's geriatric nephew, is holding court. He had once locked up his mother in her flat because she would not sign some legal documents. Each day, he would lower a basket with lunch and dinner from his apartment to his mother's bedroom window a floor below. When Huma heard about the incident, she told Amma, that is terrible on Murad's part. He could have at least sent her breakfast too. Amma had looked at Huma with a blank expression on her face before letting out a guttural laugh. Good joke, Huma, she recalls her mother saying. People don't remember commonplace things. They remember first times and rare occasions. Amma's compliments were seldom tossed in Huma's direction. She watches them bicker, Padma Ben and Murad. Burn, bury, two words that differ by a single letter.
Thank you, Twinkle. But can I ask you, when you were writing, do you go back to it to see? Because these are really complex themes. There's addiction there, there's violence, there's a lot of negotiation. There's Huma herself who's trying to walk through her own griefs. When do you know that you've got the right balance of the funny with what you're trying to say? Do you find yourself ever, is it through a process of sort of redrafting and so on that you hit at that balance? Or is that just natural to you that you come to it that you only can think of, well, there's something complex going on and there will be pigs and penises there as well. I mean, I'm curious about the process and how this balance occurs.
No, I don't think I think about the balance. That comes naturally. But in this story, where is Chiki? I'm very scared because she's told me stop talking about technical things, you're boring people, but I will talk about whatever the hell I want to talk about. She reads every interview and she says, why are you talking about temporal continuum? You're boring people. But I'm not going to listen to her. So in this story, in the first draft, it was only from Huma's perspective and it was in close third. But it didn't hold the story. And so I decided that I was going to write it from two perspectives, Sarah's, who's the younger daughter, and Huma. And each chapter was in each person's perspective. And as the mother and daughter get closer, technically, I also wanted to bring them closer on the page. So I would flip between their perspectives on the same page till eventually they're right next to each other. So in that, it was a technical challenge. That bothers me. The way time moves in stories bothers me. And those are things I worry about. But no, I think it's the way I naturally see life. If life throws me a curveball, I'll put it on my nose and start clowning around. So that's the way I look at things, and the humor just seeps in.
We'll move to another story, which is actually my favorite, which was Let's Pretend. There's a beautiful line in there where you say, in pretending to be someone else, you find freedom to be yourself. I mean, this is one of the characters saying this. It's a story of people contending with loneliness, but they're poker pals. How did this idea of poker pal friendships and online friendships and pretense, how did this come to be? Curious about the genesis of this story.
I don't know about where the pretense came, but I do know that when I got married, my mother-in-law, now when I look back, she was just 3 or 4 years older than what I am today. But she had already resigned herself to this life of a widow, which meant that she would, do nothing much, and then at 3 o'clock put on her rollers and then go and play cards at the club. And her older friends who could not join her sometimes, they would start playing, on the computer. They all had these desktops. They weren't really laptops at that point of time. And I thought that it was still a way of getting this community together, and of them doing something that they really enjoy and they play every day, and that was the highlight of, their day. And I think that kind of stayed with me, and it was part of the story. But the premise of this story was based on an anecdote by a friend. She came from this strict Maharashtrian family, and she told me that when she was growing up, this very straight-laced mother kept telling her that, listen, she was a bit flat-chested, that, you have to massage your breasts for them to develop. And she kept telling her that, asa karaicha. So in the shower, you have to keep doing this. And it stayed with me. And she came to the book launch and she said, just one favor, please don't tell anybody it's me. I'm just here sitting there at the back. And I promised her I wouldn't. But yeah, I think that kind of grew from that anecdote.
My favorite line in that story is also when, in fact, the lady who was contending with the implants and so on, I think you're talking about her, and she wonders when did she start falling for men with broad shoulders vis-a-vis her current partner. And I thought that was a really nice meditation on singledom and
men with symmetrical features and broad shoulders. Yes, but yes, she does.
Yes. One of the things that also just jumps out, at least when I was reading Jelly Sweets, is, you mentioned in your acknowledgements as well that this very much draws from your grandmother's stories. Could you tell us a little bit about that story? And it involves Nusrat. I mean, I think the one way I would describe it, and obviously, you would have perhaps a different way, is the principal character of Nusrat is essentially silenced by her grief. And through the story, she finds a voice. And it was magical, in fact, in the way I think you dealt with different phases of her loss. Could you tell us a bit about what brought that story to be?
So Jelly Sweets is actually the first story I wrote in this collection. I started writing it 8 years ago. And it was the last story I finished before publication. And my great-grandmother, it's based on my great-grandmother's story, where she, back, I guess, in the 1920s, 30s, she got married, she had a son, and he died when he was very young, and she sort of went mad. And then her family threw her out, and she came back to her parents, and she met her neighbor again, and they got married, and then they had, I don't know, a dozen children and a glorious life. And he was so nice to her that my grandmother says that he didn't want her to do any work, and she loved to cook. So when he was coming back, she would quickly wash her hands and sit on the swing with a magazine, pretending that she'd been sitting there all day. That didn't make it to the story, but the details that she told me, some of them did. Like, they came to Bombay. They lived in Satpati, and they took the train to Bombay. And when they went to the hotel, there was no lift, so he decided he was going to carry her up the 7 floors. So I just felt that it was a story about redemption, loss and redemption, and not about life being perfect. It was not like they were madly in love, but their own losses had made them compassionate towards each other. Yeah. And this is a story, though I've been really troubling. Chiki, where are you? Can you come on stage for a minute? No, I want you to come here, please, since this book would not be the way it is without you, both the good and the bad. So Chiki was very clear that this would be the story that would make everyone cry, and this was her favorite story. And with this one, she was right. Can you please come up? So that's Chiki, my editor and publisher, and the most amazing person I know. You have to come up. Okay, and what do you have to say about this book? At least admit that you were wrong about many things, just once.
Yes.
Say that this
We
technical
had more fights than not fights. We fought about a lot of the stories.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you how the fights went. I said, this is a hard story to pull off. Let's see if you can do it. And Twinkle's like, I'm going to do it. And then she'd do it, and then she'd send me the next draft, and she's like, isn't it done? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, see, I told you so. You have no faith in me. You have no confidence in me. And I'd say, but I didn't say that you couldn't do it. I just said it's a hard story to pull off. And that's how we had the book.
Yeah, my constant line was, you have no faith in me. Just wait. You have no faith in me. I'll pull it off. And she'd be like, in the story about the funeral,
Yeah.
she said there are 2 different stories. You're not going to be able to merge them as one. And I just said, have faith in me, Chiki. And she did, and we're here.
Well, yeah, so that's true.
Thanks, Chiki. I'm not going to talk about the story of Welcome to Paradise, because there should be one story that we leave to the mystery of people who haven't read it. And please do. This is a stunning collection of stories. But I do want to close on the novella, and then I want to ask you a few other questions just broadly about writing. The novella has already been in conversation a lot. This is a woman, Madhura, fairly, into sort of age, dealing with Parkinson's, essentially writes to the Chief Justice of India, says, I would like the right to die. And I know, Twinkle, you mentioned that this draws from the work, movements that you'd been aware of. Could you talk a little bit about how you went into writing it? Because one of the things about that novella is also that it's not so much just about her seeking this right to die, but it's almost like you're talking us through her accepting her own choices and how you perhaps never recover from your choices and contending with them. How did this piece of work come to be, and could you tell us?
So I had read the reports about the Lavate's petitioning for euthanasia, and it really left a mark on me. And then I was reading Diana Reem's book about interviews that she did with people who were seeking euthanasia, doctors as well as patients and families, to see, all sides of the euthanasia debate. And so it kind of stuck in my head about this woman who's had a convoluted life, and now she's very pragmatic about it. She's seen her father who's kind of suffer, and she wants to end it on a high note. And she truly believes that she wants to treat death like a creditor, invite him over for tea and say, here's what I owe you. It's already been long overdue, and I'd rather you take it now before you clobber me when I'm not looking. And so that began, and then I had this teacher called Mr. Patrao in Panchgani. He was an absolute genius. Before me, he worked at St. Peter's, and he was Freddie Mercury's teacher. So we always had this connection. When the strawberry plantations in Panchgani were sort of dying, he revived them with his knowledge of science. And I think the way that he taught physics was also remarkable. He would use anecdotes, and once he told us a story about, you might feel it's a bit strange for people, but he said that there were a group of boys who were playing football on tableland, and then lightning struck and one boy died. But then they discovered that, strangely enough, he was not the tallest boy in the group. And lightning always strikes the tallest person. And then they investigated and they found out that the tallest boy had bent down to tie his shoelaces. I don't know if it's a true story or if it was just his way of teaching us, but these were the sort of things he used. And I think I drew on him a little bit to when I was writing Madhura's character.
This book also, I think, bears from your degree in training and exceptional distinction now at Goldsmiths, which is also another thing I'm very jealous of you of. So many things. What did, as someone who doesn't have formal training, I was actually very curious, what did that program, what do you think it's done for your writing? And how does that training speak to the writing that we're seeing right now?
When my son was young, I used to take him to the school counselor. And I kept saying, I want to go back to uni. And he turned around and he told me, well, now you have to focus on your child and, maybe later when he's grown up. And I used to laugh at him and say, that's so misogynistic, I'm going to put you in the newspaper. And then he would joke with me about it. And finally, in the pandemic, I decided that I wanted to study a little bit. Like everyone else, I was looking at my life. So I did 6 months of online courses at Oxford. And I really loved it. I felt I learned so much and I was immersed in this world of writing. And then I wanted to go to university. And I didn't know which ones to go to. And Keshwa, he's also standing there somewhere. He's responsible for me going to Goldsmiths because he was doing his master's there and then he does his PhD there. And at one point, my son and I were both applying to universities together. And we had one university that both of us, without realizing, had applied to, and we were horrified. It was not our first choice, but it was like, oh my God, if we get in, then I'm going to have my son on the campus, and he was going to see me. And we said, well, if that happens, we're going to pretend we don't know each other, because that's really uncool. But I ended up getting my first choice, Goldsmiths, and I don't think anyone can teach you how to write, because that would be teaching you how your perspective is shaped, and that doesn't happen. But they do teach you how you can analyze your work, because you're analyzing everyone else's work, and there's a sort of scaffolding you can use. Yeah. But more than that, I also thought that I suddenly had this group of uni friends. I had 4 friends, and we called each other, our group was called Scribes in the City. One was 66. There was me, 50, so the 2 buddhis, and then we had these 2 25-year-olds. I have to say the buddhis kind of outed the 25-year-olds. But
I was thinking we should retire buddhis.
Yeah.
That word. No, go ahead.
But it was really nice. I was so scared that who would I have lunch with every day, and then I met them and I never had to have lunch alone again, and I think that was my highlight. So yeah, it was great.
Were you nervous at all going back for training?
I was nervous the first time I had to do a critical analysis essay, and that I was nervous about because I'd never done that. But it took a month. I had to research for a month, and then I wrote it, and then after that I was okay. I'm also 50 now. Very few things scare me. I've seen a lot of much scarier things in my life. So yeah. Once you've given, if I had a child without pain relief, I don't think a lot of things can scare you.
Twinkle, my last question, and do that significant applause to that point, and then I want to open it up actually for the audience. What are you reading these days, and are you already thinking about what you will be writing next? Any suggestions?
I'm reading The Bandit Queen or The Bandit Queens. I don't know. I just finished that because it's the Tweak Book Club Book of the Month for Jan. And I read science fiction every day. That's something I've been doing since I was very young. I read 3 or 4 short stories every night, and I go to sleep dreaming about watery planets and green tentacles, and it's very calming for me. I don't know about other people. So those are the 2 things I'm reading. And yeah, I always have stories. I have a lot of unfinished stories in my folders, and I'll pull them out, and if they still resonate, then I'll sit. So yeah, I was at the airport surrounded by Meduvaras, and I was trying to work out a plot, which I'll talk to Chiki about tomorrow, but we'll see. She may again reject it and say, this is too difficult, don't do it.
Which means you try. Yeah. Can I just ask one thing? How long did Welcome to Paradise take you, just from first draft to the final version?
Like I told you, how do I quantify that? Because I started writing Jelly Sweets 8 years ago, and it was the last story. So I really don't know, where do stories begin and when do they begin? It's very difficult to tell.
Yeah. So at least it's been 8 years and longer in the
In
making.
some way, yeah, in some way.
Thank you. We'll open up. Are there any questions for Twinkle?
It's really so good to see you. I've read each and every book of yours. I've read Mrs. Funnybones 12 times, and I open any random page just to cheer my day up. Your books are genuinely like homemade kheer on a day when I feel like crying.
Thank you. That makes me feel really wonderful. Thank you.
I have one question and a small request. I got your book. I've read it. I got this book as a birthday gift from my best friend. So if you could please sign it. Secondly, I have the question for you is, from all the characters and stories that you have put together in this book, which one seems to convey your journey of grief best?
That's a great question. I think it's the first story because it's not just about losing someone, but it's also about how love can actually become a tragedy. Too much love can become a tragedy. And I think so that kind of does speak to me the most.
Hello, ma'am. Good to see you. I have a question, goes back to what you were talking about, fiction versus memoir. So how do you decide or arrive at the genre of what you're going to write? Because is fiction truly possible? Because most of it is derived from inspiration, some observations. So how do you actually decide how are you going to label your work?
Well, actually, it's up to me. If I tell you that this is a bunch of lies, you have to believe me. It could be the truth. So I think that fiction just makes the truth more palatable. And I've always believed that if you want to make it simple, the truth is a potato. Now, you make French fries, you make aloo jeera. You're presenting potato. The potato's chemical composition doesn't change. It's just the way you're serving it. And that's what we do with all our experiences, our memories. The truth doesn't change. We just change the way that we are presenting it.
So the main ingredient remains more or less truth, and only the spices make the fiction part of it.
It's not possible to write otherwise, right? No, not at all.
Yeah.
I have a very simple question. Out of curiosity, do you go back to your very old drafts and reread them again? And if you reread them, what do you feel? Like the drafts that never made it to a book or something else, personal writing or just...
No, I don't really go back to my old drafts and reread them. I have folders of deleted things from stories, lots of deleted things, and then I go and look at them and I borrow them for columns and I borrow them for other stories. I already established the fact that I'm Gujarati, so we don't waste anything. So it's always there and I use it.
Very good evening. It's just, it's surreal to see you. I've read Mrs. Funnybones in the newspaper and I'm seeing you today. I really want to give you good wishes and lots of blessings. And, there's a very popular nursery rhyme. Kids just, land on this earth. And they are learning that rhyme, but in all goodwill. I really wish that, you also achieve like 10 times the popularity through your craft and your career. And my question, is there any character which is like, which you wrote as if, which you felt, that character could save you? Any character which was like, you really wanted a savior kind of character who could save you from grief, who could save you in a situation where you don't know what you were going through, who could really help you even with 1% of a solution in that situation.
I don't know about any character I've written, but I have many, many books that have saved me and books I've escaped into. I think when I was a young girl, well, now we have fancy words. You call it vestibular integration and proprioception and nonsense. But back in the day, we used to just say clumsy. So I've broken every bone in my body, my legs, my collarbone, my tailbone. In the pandemic, when nobody could move, I still managed to fracture my foot. I broke my arm in a bicycle accident. So when I had all these injuries, I think the one thing that did save me was just the fact that I had all my science fiction novels and I could disappear into those pages, into other galaxies. I couldn't limp to the bathroom, but I could still go, to Mars. And I think books saved me. So it's not my characters, but just reading everyone's work.
So I just had one question to ask you. Is that when did you first realize that you wanted to become a writer?
I wanted to become a chartered accountant and I can't think about that anymore. I think it just happened. Strangely, I think I actually realized I'm a writer in the pandemic when I had a writer's block for the first time. And I figured out that I could not process the world unless I wrote my way through it. And that's when I realized I'm a writer. Wasn't before that.
And also, I would like to say that Mrs. Funnybones is like one of my favorite books. I can read it anytime I want to. I've read it 10, 12 times right now. So, thank you.
Yeah, you're just making Cheeky's argument for Mrs. Honeybones too much stronger. And I've been saying, no. So, yeah, thank you for that.
Firstly, good afternoon or good evening, soon coming. We've seen you as an actress, as an interior designer, now as a writer. Who's the one who's actually you? Not the role in you.
It depends which week you find me in.
Is it multiple of all? Or I would say, no, when I read your Funny Bones, I find some kind of deep pain inside you which you're putting in humor, found of humor, which is very commendable, and thank you so much.
Who doesn't have pain? I mean, creatures on this planet can cause pain and feel pain, and we are the only ones who can take pain and turn it into a punchline, and that's a gift, right? So we should use it.
Mom, you mentioned that nobody can teach you writing, right? I agree on that part. But is there any one thing that helped you in writing apart from reading other books?
No, I think it was reading. There are lots of authors in this country. They largely tend to be men for some reason who say that they don't read but they write. I don't know how they do it. But I don't think that there's a bigger teacher than just reading and reading as diversely as you can.
I want to actually double down on what you just said. For my next book, I'm interviewing, it's going to be called The Tyranny of the Indian Uncle.
I love the title, I have to say that.
It will reach you. One of the first drafts will reach you, Twinkle. And what's funny is I've been interviewing all these men in their 50s and, captains of industry and so on who come from elite schools. And I ask them, who are you reading? What music inspires you? And it is unbelievable how little, fiction is a different question itself, how little they read women and Indian women, and how I think the work and words of Indian women just don't seem to exist in the vocabulary, and it's so masculine in terms of what they're consuming. So I just wanted to echo that.
Hi, I have a question for both of you actually. When you're writing, for me particularly, I dabble with words a little. There are a lot of thoughts that are in my head, but a lot of times I feel like they're very stupid thoughts and then probably shouldn't pen them down. So have you ever faced the imposter syndrome? And if yes, how have you recovered from it, or how have you pushed yourself forward to write it down?
I'll ask you. Actually, my agent, Shruti, who plays a very similar function with Cheeky, I think perhaps, she's a spirit animal and guide. She told me my first draft of Shahrukh actually was extremely academic because I think I was trying to write to please a certain self-serious non-fiction reader, like a certain kind of person, a scholar. And she said, you write the way you want to write this. She could tell looking at the page that I was hiding behind sort of academies and technicalities. And I think in readers who give you very rigorous feedback, sometimes you find yourself. So if you can't do that for yourself, I've always also learned to just rely on others. But sometimes after a while, I'd been writing this book for 15 years. So, at a certain point of time, you realize you have to trust your instinct and just put it on the page. But I have relied on some trusted readers to tell me, you're bullshitting right now and you're hiding. And what you're actually trying to say is not on the page, just write what you want to write, even if you think it's silly. And I think that comfort of having a rigorous reader has been very helpful to me. Ma'am.
I think the first draft is basically the scariest. And your first draft, in my head, at least the way I do it, is I tell myself this is just regurgitated vomit. It doesn't matter. I deliberately use a terrible font so that I feel I'm not taking myself seriously. There is no pursuit of perfection in that draft. And once you have the words out, then you can sift through them and distill them and get that clarity and that perfect sentence. And that perfect sentence can be 2 weeks later, but at least you have the words on the page. So everyone feels, when I look at that first draft, am I an imposter? I don't know, but I'm definitely someone who's thrown up on that paper. And I think you should accept that and go on, and that's how you'll get a book together.
Okay, well, we'll go with the lady and then we'll come to another one. Please.
Good evening, ma'am. It's really nice to see you. And having read Mrs. Funnybones and all your columns, it's a treat to read them. And I think never before have I gone on a guilt trip for lending a book like today, because I've just lent Mrs. Funnybones to a colleague of mine. And I also, like everybody else, wanted a signature of yours, which I couldn't, take back from her. So my question is that, you having excelled in both academic writing and fiction writing would be, the correct person to answer it, because I am into research and I'm pursuing a PhD. And I do write from time to time. And I grapple with the fact that, how do we distinguish the two? Because whenever I receive a feedback from my professor, I'm often told that, you should not use a flowery language while you're writing, academic writing. And my second one is that, do you, like everybody else, face writer's block, and how do you overcome that?
You want to take it? No, you've done both kinds of writing as well, and then I'll go next.
Well, I think on flowery language, I don't know, often you have to ask yourself, who are you communicating? Often, at least in economics, I can speak only for economics, I can't speak for anything else. Often we just write for other economists or for people in power and government. And I honestly hate that kind of writing. The reason, in fact, the whole genesis of the Shahrukh book was because I wanted to have a more public conversation on data on employment. And I felt that if one of Bollywood's biggest actors can sort of trick people into reading more about what's happening to women in the economy, wonderful. And it was a test for myself. It was a challenge. But I think for me, you just have to be very clear who are you reading for. In my mind, when I was writing, I know it's going to sound crazy and you laugh, I was writing for Shah Rukh Khan and my grandmother. And my grandmom, she's laughing. And my grandmom was one of these people who, Bengali woman, who would constantly say, why is it that all these Bengali men become economists? They write about us, but I can never understand what they're saying. And I had her in my mind, and I thought, well, if I wanted to communicate these really complex thoughts to these two people as just readers, what would that writing be like, right? So I think sometimes it helps to just clarify and distill for yourself, the point about flowery language or academic language or the style of writing. What are you trying to convey and who are you trying to convey it for? If it's just an academic paper, then of course you play the rules of the game and you write an academic paper. But if it's for a larger audience, then you have to ask yourself, who is that reader and will they even understand some of the language that I think academics are particularly encouraged to use, and maybe stress test that a bit.
So I have limited experience in that, and the first academic paper that I had to write, I asked Keshwa, can you please send me all your submissions so I can have a look and see what you had to do? And then I had to ask the 25-year-old, how do you do citations? Because, I didn't know how to do it, and the 8th grader knew. And so somehow I pieced it together like that. As far as writer's block is concerned, with a column, you don't have a choice. The deadline is a wrecking ball. You have no choice. You sit down and you just get through it. I think if you really do get blocked, then it makes sense to walk your dog and take a shower. Showers are the best places. And I'm very scared that I'm wasting resources and I'm turning my skin into a prune, but it really works. And I asked Harlan Coben this, I was interviewing him, and he said, he has a whiteboard in his shower. I don't know how much water he's using, and I don't know whether, he doesn't have too much hair because of that reason, but he does have a whiteboard in his shower.
Creativity and whiteboards and showers.
Do you write something just for yourself, like secret, private writing, which nobody knows about? And if yes, allow me to ask, what is it about, or maybe how does it help you?
No, I don't have any secret writing. But as a family, we did write a travel journal where each one of us wrote a little bit about it. And I cannibalized some of other people's, my family's thoughts, and I threw it into a column. So yeah, I'm really bad like that. I'm a vampire. I suck their blood, their ideas, both.
Hi, I have two questions to you. The first one is actually on publishing. So for someone who is new to this domain of writing, and let's say that they write a certain piece of work, what do they do after that? Whom do they send it to for review, feedback, or for publishing? So since you have been in this field for a long period of time, do you have thoughts on that? And secondly, whenever I personally start reading, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, sometimes there's a ton of things that I feel are important, but I just lose track of that. So I'm in this space where I'm just trying to figure out what is the best way of, do I track arguments, do I take down notes, do I have a separate copy to write that down? So how do you do that?
I'll ask her to answer that as well. In terms of publishing, I have to acknowledge that I do have a certain privilege when it came to that, because I was well known. Maybe it was easier for me to get a publisher, and I'd also done columns for a long time, and I come from this twinkling world, so it was easier. I think it might be slightly tougher for other people, so I'm going to ask her to answer that part. As far as how to read, I don't know. I annotate everything. I have, marks all over. I also stain my books with banana chips and dal, because I read everywhere. I think books are meant to be loved, not worshipped. So, just go ahead, scratch all over them, and then you'll remember.
I would not have been published had it not been for my agent. So sometimes I think in the way the industry is now increasingly getting organized, trying to talk to a few agents, send your work, that's very helpful. But I do feel one of the things that you should always keep in mind is write the book that you want to write, whatever it is. I mean, it's the argument. And the reason I say that is because I did get feedback initially saying, well, this would work better if it was just about poor women, or if it was just about Shah Rukh Khan, or if it was just about this. But there was a book that I wanted to write. And I think sometimes you'll find alignment with someone who'll work with you on that text. And it's not easy, but I mean, redrafts. I mean, I'm sure this is true for your work as well. I mean, I think my book was redrafted at least 12, 15 times, if not more. So it takes time. So I would advocate patience, but I do think contacting, there's now increasingly a mushrooming of agencies and so on. Try and work with agents if you can, and try and see if even parts of your work can be published on different platforms. That really helps. And yes, I echo what Twinkle just said about please make notes everywhere. It doesn't matter where. I have an Excel file for life because I track data as well, so I keep populating it. It may only make sense to me, but it's useful to have.
So my question to both of you is, in the times that we live in, is feminism a term which is often misunderstood?
By whom? By men? I don't know.
Anyone. Not just men, it could be anyone.
No, I think and people before us have pushed their way to at least let us stand here where we want to be equal. We are not biologically equal. I think we're biologically superior, but we're trying to be equal. So, yeah.
So,
we have to, I've just been told, but no, there is no misunderstanding of feminism because it's not a label, it's a way of living life. So I think you should read more and then it will. And read Twinkle and she will. Or watch a Shah Rukh Khan movie and, you'll understand. Feminism has various shades.
Namaste, Twinkle. I'm really a big fan of your work. Being books. Also, I've seen your movie Barsat, which was his debut. And I want to ask you that, first of all, congratulations for finishing your master's from Goldsmith University in London. And I really applaud for that because you're a homemaker, you're also a writer, and you have to look after your kids, and still you go to London to study and increase your things. I want to ask that you haven't read I have read the book, The Legend of Lakshmi Prasad, and it is based on the true story of Murugattan, Arunachalam Murugattan. And it was then converted into a movie also.
So this book that you wrote, it was based on a whole research on him, and how did you went through it, the research process? And do you like writing more the truth stories or something which is non-fictional, which is not the truth? Like, thank you.
I really don't differentiate between the two, but yeah, with Muruganantham, I first had to chase him to get an interview, and then I had to convince him that to give me a chance to write his story, which he kindly did. He also looked at me and he mistook me for Ravina Tandon. At that point, I didn't want to write his story, but my greed was so much that I decided to overcome that slide. But yeah, you do have to do a lot of research. But even in stories which may seem like you don't, there isn't that much research, you have folders and folders of research. You have to know every aspect of your character. I mean, right now, I think I'm an expert at Parkinson's, though I don't have it, because I had to do so much research on that particular topic. So yeah, I think research is first and also gives you more ideas.
Thank you. I think with that we close.
But I'd like, on behalf of a suitable agency and Sundar Nursery, I'd like to thank you both for this absolutely riveting conversation. Thank you, Twinkle. Thank you, Shrayana.